A woman who scrubbed hotel toilets for $6 an hour had not drawn a straight line in 7 years. She raised her daughter alone in a town that smelled like salt and pine. Nobody knew her real name. She wanted it that way. Then one afternoon, a helicopter landed in the parking lot of the Days Inn where she worked, and a man in a 3-piece suit walked through the lobby holding a blueprint she had designed when she was someone else. The alarm on Maya Sandoval's phone went off at 4:30 every morning, but she was always awake before it. Her body had learned the rhythm the way tides learn the moon, automatic, wordless, non-negotiable. She lay in the dark for exactly 2 breaths, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like the state of Florida, if you squinted right. Then she swung her legs over the edge of the mattress and stood up. The trailer was narrow, 2 bedrooms separated by a wall so thin you could hear someone turn a page on the other side. A kitchen where the stove had 3 working burners and one that clicked but never caught. A bathroom with a shower head that sprayed more sideways than down. But the place was spotless, every surface wiped, every dish stacked, the kind of order that doesn't come from having nice things. It comes from a person who needs the world to hold still in the few square feet she can control. Maya made oatmeal. She sliced a banana into it the way Lena liked, alternating thick and thin pieces, because Lena once said the thick ones tasted different, and Maya never corrected her. She poured a glass of orange juice, the store-brand kind that came in a plastic jug, and set it on the table next to a placemat Lena had made at school from construction paper and dried macaroni. Down the hall, a door creaked. Lena appeared in the kitchen doorway, 8 years old, wearing an oversized t-shirt that hung past her knees and carrying a spiral notebook so thick with drawings that the cover barely closed. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were already wide open. "Mom, did you know the Burj Khalifa sways 2 meters at the top?" Maya set the bowl on the table. "Eat your oatmeal. 2 whole meters. That's like from the fridge to the door. And it doesn't fall because of the buttresses." Buttresses, yeah. Lena climbed into her chair and flipped the notebook open. The pages were filled with drawings, not the scribbles of a typical 8-year-old, but careful elevations of buildings, some real, some imagined, drawn with colored pencils and labeled in handwriting that leaned hard to the right. She'd been doing this for 2 years, ever since she found a book about famous structures at the library's free bin. "See, I drew one. My building has 6 buttresses, and it's taller than the Burj Khalifa. By a lot." Maya looked at the drawing. The proportions weren't right. The base was too narrow for the height. The wind loads would be impossible, and she caught herself calculating, the numbers surfacing in her mind before she could stop them. She looked away. "Eat, baby. I'm eating." Maya watched her daughter shovel oatmeal into her mouth while sketching with her free hand, the pencil moving across the page with a confidence that had no business being in the fingers of an 8-year-old. Something pulled tight behind Maya's ribs. Not pain. Something older. Something she'd learned not to examine, the way you learn not to press on a bruise just to check if it still hurts. By 5:45, they were walking to the bus stop. The trailer park sat at the edge of Carthage, a town on the Georgia coast that had exactly 1 traffic light, 1 gas station, 1 grocery store, and 1 motel, the Days Inn, where Maya had worked housekeeping for 5 years. The morning smelled like marsh grass and diesel from the shrimp boats. Lena walked beside her, still talking about load-bearing walls and foundation depths, and Maya listened, the way she always did, carefully, quietly, with a stillness that could have been mistaken for disinterest, but was actually its opposite. At the bus stop, Maya knelt down and zipped Lena's jacket. A habit. Something Daniel used to do. She didn't think about that. "You be good today. I'm always good." "Then keep it up." The bus came. Lena climbed on, waved once through the window, and was gone. Maya stood there until the bus rounded the bend. Then she walked to work. The Days Inn was the kind of motel that had seen better decades. The carpet in the lobby was the color of a headache. The ice machine on the 2nd floor had been broken since March. The rooms smelled like air freshener layered over air freshener, a geological record of every cleaning shift. Maya didn't mind. The work was physical. It asked nothing of her brain. She stripped beds, scrubbed bathrooms, vacuumed floors, restocked towels. Her hands moved fast and precise, folding hospital corners so tight you could bounce a quarter off them, arranging toiletries in lines so even they looked measured with a ruler. Gerald, the maintenance man, had noticed this once. He'd watched her organize the supply closet, every bottle faced forward, labels aligned, shelves wiped down to a shine, and he joked, "Maya, you clean closets like you're designing them." She'd said nothing. He hadn't brought it up again. The other staff liked her well enough. She was quiet, reliable, never late, never called in sick. When old Mrs. Wee, Pemberton at the front desk, slipped on a wet floor and twisted her ankle, Maya had wrapped it with an ace bandage from the first aid kit, not just wrapped it, but stabilized the joint with a technique that distributed pressure across the ligament with a precision that made the paramedic pause. Nobody asked about it. Maya didn't explain. That was how things worked in Carthage. You didn't dig, and people didn't offer their dirt. After work, Maya picked up Lena from the after-school program at the church, and they walked home together. The late light turned the marsh gold. Lena ran ahead, came back, ran ahead again, a small planet orbiting her mother. At home, routine. Maya cooked dinner, rice and chicken thighs, sometimes black beans if it was end of the month, while Lena sat at the table drawing or doing homework. After dinner, there was always something to fix. Tonight, the screen door. The hinge had rusted through, and the door hung at an angle that let mosquitoes in all night. Maya pulled it off, replaced the hinge with one she'd salvaged from a dumpster behind the hardware store, and rehung it. Lena held the screws. "Mom, yeah, Keisha at school said her family's going to Disney World for spring break." "That's nice. Are we going anywhere?" Maya tightened the last screw. She tested the door. It swung clean, closed flush. "We'll see." Lena nodded the way kids do when "we'll see" means no. She didn't push. She went back to her notebook and drew a castle with flying buttresses and a drawbridge. She labeled it Lena's Disney and propped it on the windowsill. Maya looked at it for a long time after Lena fell asleep. Then she sat at the kitchen table, stared at the wall, and felt the thing she felt every night, the weight of the locked filing cabinet in the bedroom closet, the one she hadn't opened in 7 years, the one that held blueprints and a degree and a photograph and a name she no longer used. She closed her fists, turned off the light, went to bed. The storm arrived on a Thursday, not a hurricane. The coast got those in September, but a raw, ugly nor'easter that bent the pine trees flat and drove the rain sideways. By 9 o'clock, the power was out in half of Carthage. The trailer rocked in the gusts. Maya lit a candle, checked on Lena, who slept through weather the way only children can, completely, recklessly, and sat by the window watching the parking lot of the trailer park flood. At 10:15, her phone buzzed. Gerald, from the Days Inn. "Maya, you gotta come in. We got a situation." "It's my night off." "I know, but half the ceiling in the East Wing just came down. Water everywhere, guests freaking out, and there's some kind of VIP party staying in the penthouse suite that Mr. Harmon's losing his mind about. I need hands." Maya looked at Lena, asleep under 2 blankets. She called Mrs. Okafor next door, who agreed to come sit without a single question, and drove to the motel through rain that turned the road into a river. The Days Inn was chaos. Water streamed from a crack in the East Wing ceiling, buckling the drywall, pooling on the second-floor hallway. Gerald was up on a ladder with a bucket, fighting a losing battle. Mr. Harmon, the owner, was in the lobby in his bathrobe, yelling into his phone. 3 guests stood near the vending machine looking like refugees. Maya got to work. She grabbed mops, tarps, redirected the worst of the water. But then she went upstairs to check the damage and stopped. She looked at the crack in the ceiling, really looked at it, not the way a housekeeper looks at a mess, the way a structural engineer looks at a failure point. The crack wasn't from water pressure. It was running along the line where a load-bearing wall had been removed, She could see the outline of the old framing in the exposed drywall. Someone had taken out structural support during a renovation, probably years ago, and replaced it with nothing. The ceiling wasn't leaking because of the storm. The storm had just been the last straw. The ceiling was failing because the building was slowly tearing itself apart. Maya's hands went cold. She walked the hallway, pressing her palm flat against the walls at intervals, feeling for the flex. She found it in 3 places. The deformation pattern told her exactly what was happening. The load path was compromised, redistributing weight to members that weren't designed to carry it. In warm weather, thermal expansion masked it. In a cold storm with high wind, the contraction exposed every weakness. This wasn't a leak. This was a potential collapse. "Gerald," she said, her voice sharp enough to stop him mid-bucket pour. "How many guests on this floor? 12 rooms occupied, maybe. Get them out, right now, all of them." Gerald stared at her. "Maya, it's just a ceiling. It's not just a ceiling. It's not just a ceiling. The load path is interrupted. There's no support between the second 4 joists and the foundation on this side. This whole wing could pancake." The words came out of her with an authority that didn't match the woman in the housekeeping uniform. Gerald's face changed. He didn't argue. Something in her voice, in the way she said pancake, like a person who had seen it happen, made him move. They evacuated the East Wing in 9 minutes. Maya directed it like a field operation, calm, efficient, telling people exactly where to go and why without causing panic. 14 guests, including a family with a toddler, relocated to the west side. 20 minutes later, a section of the East Wing hallway ceiling collapsed. Drywall, insulation, a chunk of ductwork. It landed exactly where room 214's door was. Room 214 had been occupied by the family with a toddler. Gerald stood in the lobby, white as milk, and looked at Maya. "How did you know?" "Lucky guess." He didn't believe her. Neither did Mr. Harmon. And neither did the man who came downstairs from the penthouse suite at midnight. His name was Victor Ashford. He was 63, built like a man who'd once carried heavy things and now paid others to carry them, with gray hair and eyes that evaluated everything they landed on. He ran Ashford Pacific, the largest real estate development firm on the eastern seaboard. He'd been in Carthage to inspect a stretch of coastline his company was about to turn into a $400 million resort. He'd been staying at the Days Inn because the resort didn't exist yet, and the Days Inn was the only accommodation within 30 miles. He found Maya in the East Wing hallway, standing in front of the collapsed section with a flashlight, examining the exposed framing with the focus of someone reading a document in a language only she understood. "You the one who called the evacuation?" Maya turned. She saw the suit, the posture, the watch. She read him the way she read buildings, fast, structural, load-bearing details first. "Yeah. The manager told me you predicted exactly where the failure would occur. Wasn't hard. The framing told the story." Ashford studied her, the housekeeping uniform, the flashlight, the way she said framing like a professional, not a bystander. "What's your name?" "Maya." "Maya what?" She didn't answer. She turned off the flashlight and walked past him toward the supply closet. He watched her go. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. 2 days later, the storm cleared. The Days Inn closed the East Wing for repairs. Maya went back to her routine. Clean rooms, pick up Lena, cook dinner, fix something, go to bed. She told herself the incident was over. A leak, an evacuation, nothing more. She told herself that the way she'd read the building was just common sense, the kind of thing anyone with eyes could see. She was lying, and she knew it. On Monday afternoon, a black Lincoln Town car was parked outside the trailer park. A woman in a blazer stepped out and handed Maya a business card. "Mr. Ashford would like to meet with you. I'm a housekeeper. He's aware." Maya took the card. She did not call. On Wednesday, the town car came back. On Friday, a courier delivered a manila envelope. Inside, architectural drawings for the Ashford Pacific Carthage Resort. 15 buildings, 2 parking structures, a conference center with a cantilevered roof, a swimming complex, $400 million. 3,200 section workers scheduled to break ground in 60 days. And a note, handwritten, "These plans have a problem. Every engineer I've hired says they don't. I think you'll see it in 10 minutes. VA Maya set the envelope on the kitchen table. She did not open the drawings. The envelope sat on the table for 4 days. Maya moved around it the way you move around something that might be alive. She ate her meals at the far end. She put Lena's plate on the opposite side. The envelope sat between them. "What's in the big envelope, Mom?" "Work stuff. Your work doesn't have envelopes." Maya cleared the plates and ran the water. At the day's end, the air was different. Gerald mentioned the evacuation to everyone. The story mutated, as stories do. By Thursday, the version circulating among the staff was that Maya had sensed the collapse like a psychic, which was both flattering and useless. Mr. Harmon looked at her differently now, the nervous look of a man who suspects his employee might be smarter than him and isn't sure how to feel about that. On the 5th morning, Mrs. Okafor from next door sat down beside Maya on the trailer steps while Lena was at school. Mrs. Okafor was 61, born in Lagos, had buried a husband and raised 4 children, and had never once in 3 years tried to talk about Maya's past. "That building man came again yesterday," Mrs. Okafor said. "The car sat out there for an hour." Maya said nothing. "My daughter, she tells me you saved 14 people that night, a baby." "I just told them to move." Mrs. Okafor looked at her the way old women look at young women who are wasting themselves and know it. Then she said, "Whatever you're carrying, it's heavier than you." She went inside. Her screen door slapped shut behind her. That night, after Lena fell asleep with the notebook open on her chest, a drawing of a bridge that curved like a wave, Maya sat at the table and pulled the envelope toward her. She didn't open it. She held it. Her thumb traced the sealed edge. And then the memory came. Not as a thought, as a sound, the sound of concrete giving way, the deep, guttural groan of a structure surrendering to gravity. The screens. Daniel. He had been a construction foreman. They'd met when she was 24, fresh out of Georgia Tech, hired by one of the top firms in Atlanta. She was the youngest structural engineer they'd ever brought on, and within 3 years, she was the one they put on impossible projects, the ones where the math said no, and the client said yes, and someone had to figure out how to make the building stand anyway. She was good. Not just good, exceptional. She saw structures the way musicians hear harmonies, understanding not just the notes, but the silence between them. The tension, the points where force gathered and where it released. By 30, she designed a pedestrian bridge in Savannah that won a national award. By 31, she was lead engineer on a mixed-use high-rise in Midtown Atlanta, 22 stories, the most complex project her firm had ever attempted. Daniel ran the construction crew. He was the one who translated her blueprints into steel and concrete, the one who stood on the beams at 7 in the morning and made her designs real. They married on a Saturday in October, and Lena was born the following summer. Then the subcontractor cut corners, changed the concrete mix on floors 14 to 18 without telling anyone, swapped the specified rebar grade for something cheaper. The building inspector missed it, or was paid to miss it. Maya's design was sound. Every calculation was right, but the materials underneath were lying. On a Tuesday in March, the north face of the 14th floor buckled during a concrete pour. 3 workers fell. Daniel was one of them. He died at the site. Maya was in her office 4 miles away, working on the 15th floor plans when her phone rang. The investigation cleared her completely. The subcontractor was indicted. The inspector lost his license. Every review confirmed that her structural design was flawless. The failure was in execution, not engineering. It didn't matter. 3 men were dead. One of them was her husband. And Maya Sandoval, who could see the invisible forces that held buildings together, had not seen the invisible lie that pulled one apart. She left Atlanta that week. She didn't fight the guilt. She didn't go to therapy. She didn't go to therapy. She didn't return to the firm that begged her to stay. She packed what she could carry, took 1-year-old Lena, and drove south until the highway became a 2-lane road, and the 2-lane road became Carthage, Georgia, where the tallest structure was a water tower and nobody knew her name. For 7 years, Maya Sandoval had been a housekeeper. Nothing more. Now she sat in her kitchen holding an envelope that wanted to make her something else again. She opened it. The drawings spilled across the table like a language she'd been dreaming in. Her eyes moved fast, instinctive, tracing load paths and connection details, reading the structural narrative the way she used to, the way she'd never actually stopped, even in her sleep. She saw the problem in 4 minutes. The conference center, the cantilevered roof, a dramatic 60-foot overhang designed to frame the ocean view, was supported by a transfer beam system that relied on the lateral bracing of the adjacent parking structure. But the parking structure's foundation design assumed stable soil conditions. And this was coastal Georgia. The soil was sandy clay over limestone karst. Under sustained loading and seasonal water table fluctuation, the karst would dissolve unevenly, creating differential settlement that would pull the parking structure's foundation out of alignment by millimeters per year. Invisible at first, catastrophic within a decade. When the parking structure shifted, the lateral bracing would fail and the cantilevered roof of the conference center would come down. It wasn't a design flaw anyone would catch on paper. It was a conversation between the building and the ground it sat on, a slow argument that the building would eventually lose. The kind of thing only someone who understood both structures and soil, and who had watched what happens when the ground lies about what it can hold, would see. Maya closed the drawings. She pressed her palms flat on the table. She closed her eyes. She was not an engineer. Not anymore. She went to bed. She did not sleep. The next 2 weeks were a siege. Ashford didn't send lawyers or helicopters. He was smarter than that. He sent information, a new envelope every 3 days, soil boring reports, geological surveys, a letter from his lead engineer arguing that the karst risk was within acceptable parameters. He was building a case, not for Maya to solve his problem, but for her to admit that it existed. It worked. Maya found herself reading the reports at the kitchen table after Lena went to sleep, marking them up with a pencil she'd bought at the dollar store, running calculations on the back of Lena's old homework sheets. Her handwriting came back first, the small, precise lettering she'd used on blueprints, nothing like the loose cursive of grocery lists. Then the thinking came back, the spatial logic that let her hold an entire structure in her mind and rotate it, stress test it, feel where it wanted to break. Lena noticed. "Mom, what are all those papers?" "Just some drawings." "Can I see?" "Not yet, baby." The town noticed, too. Word had traveled about the Days Inn evacuation. The black Lincoln kept showing up. Gerald told everyone at the motel that Maya had engineering knowledge, which was like saying the ocean had some water. On a Thursday evening, Ashford came himself. No car, no suit. He drove a rented pickup. The gesture was deliberate, Maya knew, and parked it outside the trailer. He knocked on the screen door she'd fixed, and when she opened it, he stood there in jeans and a flannel shirt, looking like a man who had practiced looking ordinary and almost pulled it off. "Before you say anything," he said, "I'm not here to offer you a job." Then what? A walk. They walked along the marsh trail behind the trailer park, the one Maya took Lena on Sunday mornings. The light was going gold. Herons stood in the shallows like punctuation marks. Ashford didn't small talk. "My engineers say the foundation design is fine. They've run simulations. They have data. Their data assumes homogeneous karst dissolution. It's not homogeneous. It's never homogeneous. It's never homogeneous here. The limestone under your site has solution channels running northeast-southwest. I can see it in the boring logs. The refusal depths vary by 6 feet across a 40-meter span. That's not uniform. That's a subway system under your parking structure." Ashford looked at her. She'd spoken like someone who'd been thinking about this for days, which she had, even though she'd told herself she hadn't. "Every engineering firm I've consulted missed this. They weren't looking for it. They modeled standard coastal conditions. Standard doesn't exist here, and you know this because Maya stopped walking. The marsh stretched out in front of them, flat and gold, the water catching the last light. I know this because 7 years ago, I designed a building in Atlanta, and the subcontractor changed the concrete, and 3 men died, and one of them was my husband. I know what it looks like when the ground lies. The words came out flat. She'd stripped them down to facts a long time ago, the way you strip paint off wood, layer by layer, until only the raw grain remains. Ashford was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry." She could tell he meant it. "Your resort deserves someone who still trusts their own work. I don't." She walked back to the trailer. Ashford watched her go. Then he drove away. But he left something on the porch step. A tube, the kind that holds rolled drawings. Inside, the complete structural package for the conference center. Every beam, every connection, every calculation, and a handwritten note. "I'm not asking you to redesign. I'm asking you to look. VA." Maya brought the tube inside and leaned it against the wall. That night, she paced the kitchen. She looked out the window at the dark marsh. She pulled a duffel bag from under the bed and started packing, Lena's clothes first, then her own. The emergency cash from the coffee can on the refrigerator, $380. She could drive west, find another coast, another motel, another trailer. She was zipping the bag when the floor creaked behind her. Lena stood in the doorway, barefoot, holding her notebook against her chest. Her eyes moved from the duffel bag to her mother's face. "Are we leaving?" Maya straightened. "I'm thinking about it." "Because of the man with the truck?" "Because things are getting complicated." Lena walked to the screen door and stepped out onto the cinder block that served as a front step. The night was warm and still, the stars thick over the marsh, the trailer park quiet except for the distant hum of the highway. Maya followed and sat beside her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Lena said, "Mom, you always tell me that buildings are supposed to protect people." The words were simple, 8 years old, but they landed somewhere behind the wall Maya had spent 7 years building, and she felt them hit like a crack in a foundation, small, quiet, and absolutely structural. She looked at her daughter. Lena wasn't arguing. She was just saying something true. Maya stared at the marsh. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes burned. She stood up and walked inside, past the kitchen, past the table with the envelopes, down the narrow hallway to the bedroom closet. She reached to the back, behind the winter coats they never wore, and pulled out the locked filing cabinet. Her hand shook as she worked the combination. It opened with a click that sounded like an exhale, like something finally breathing after holding still for 7 years. Inside, her Georgia Tech diploma still in its frame. A set of drafting pencils in a leather case, the points still sharp. Her PE license, expired. A photograph, Maya and Daniel on their wedding day, standing in front of the Savannah Bridge she'd designed, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing at something the photographer said, the bridge arching behind them like a promise. Maya picked up the drafting pencils. She rolled them between her fingers. They felt lighter than she remembered. Or maybe her hands were steadier. She set the photograph on the windowsill, next to Lena's drawing of the impossible Disney castle. She unrolled Ashford's drawings on the kitchen table, pinned the corners with coffee mugs, and this time she read them the way she used to. Every sheet, every detail, every hidden conversation between steel and concrete and earth. The karst problem was worse than she'd thought, but the solution was there, buried in the geology, the way a diagnosis hides in a scan. She saw it at 2 a.m., a modified deep foundation system using micropiles drilled through the karst to the stable limestone below, combined with a flexible connection between the parking structure and the conference center that would allow differential movement without transferring lateral load. It was elegant. It was expensive. And it was the kind of thing that only someone who understood failure, truly understood it, had lived inside it, could have designed. She called the number on Ashford's card at 6 a.m. "This is Maya Sandoval," she said. "I'll look at your site. That's all I'm promising." Ashford didn't say thank you. He simply said, "I'll send a car at 9. Maya hung up. She looked at the photograph on the windowsill. Daniel, laughing, the bridge behind him, and for the first time in 7 years, she didn't look away. The car came at 9. Not a Lincoln. A plain white SUV with a driver who nodded and didn't talk. Maya stood outside the trailer with Ashford's drawings in a cardboard tube and her leather pencil case in her jacket pocket. Mrs. Okafor had agreed to get Lena from the bus. She'd said, "Go do what you need to do, child," and pressed a Tupperware of jollof rice into her hands. Maya knelt in front of Lena. "I might be gone a couple days." "I know. Mrs. Okafor told me." "You be good." "Mom." Lena looked at her with steady, two old eyes. "You're going to fix the building? I'm going to try." Lena reached into her backpack and pulled out the spiral notebook, the one filled with bridges and towers and impossible castles, and held it out. "Take it, for good luck." Maya took the notebook. She held it against her chest, feeling the weight of every drawing inside, every dream her daughter had put on paper, while Maya was busy pretending she'd forgotten how to build. She pulled Lena into a hug and held her there until the driver tapped the horn once, gently. "I love you, Lena." "I love you too, Mom." Maya got in the car. In the side mirror, Lena stood on the cinder block step, one hand raised, growing smaller until the road curved past the marsh, and she was gone. The construction site was everything the trailer park was not. Acres of cleared coastal land, heavy machinery parked in rows like sleeping animals, a temporary office complex with air conditioning and conference rooms and engineers in hard hats carrying tablets. The budget for this project was more than Carthage's entire economy. Ashford met her at the gate. He introduced her to his lead engineer, a man named Dr. Brian Kessler from a firm in Charlotte, who looked at Maya's housekeeping shoes and Goodwill jacket with an expression that communicated everything his handshake tried to hide. "You've reviewed our foundation design?" Kessler asked. "I have." "And?" Maya asked for a table. She unrolled the site's geological surveys alongside the structural drawings and began. She spoke for 40 minutes without stopping. She walked them through the karst dissolution pattern, the differential settlement projections, the lateral load transfer between the parking structure and the conference center, and the cascading failure sequence that would begin in year 3 and reach critical in year 8. The room went quiet. Kessler studied the boring logs where Maya had marked the anomalous refusal depths. He called in 2 geotechnical consultants who were on site. They looked for even longer. "We modeled this as Class B soil," one of them said slowly. "The karst variability is outside our assumed parameters." "It's outside everyone's assumed parameters," Maya said. "That's why everyone missed it." Kessler didn't apologize, but he pulled out a chair across from her and sat down. In that world, sitting down was the same as opening the door. Maya spent the next 72 hours redesigning the foundation system. She worked in the temporary office, surrounded by engineers who had initially resented her and gradually stopped talking when she was in the room. Not from awkwardness, but from the focused silence that falls over people watching someone operate at a level they recognize as beyond their own. Her pencils moved across the paper with a fluency that startled even her. The micropile layout emerged in hours. The flexible connection detail, a system of slotted bolts and elastomeric bearings that would allow the parking structure to shift without dragging the conference center with it, she sketched in 20 minutes. It was the kind of solution that looked obvious in retrospect, but required seeing the building not as a static object, but as a living thing, a conversation between gravity and resistance that never ends. On the 3rd afternoon, during the final review, Kessler's team ran the modified design through their simulation software. The model held. Every load case, every seismic scenario, every worst-case karst dissolution pattern. The structure stood. Kessler looked at Maya across the conference table. He looked at her for a long time. "Where did you study?" he asked. "Georgia Tech?" "And before you were cleaning hotel rooms?" Maya met his eyes. "I was the lead structural engineer on the Midtown Lofts project in Atlanta." The room shifted. She saw the recognition move through the engineers like a current. Everyone in structural engineering knew what had happened at Midtown Lofts. Everyone knew the engineer had been cleared, and everyone assumed she'd gone to another firm, or into consulting, or into academia. Nobody imagined she'd gone to a trailer park in Carthage, Georgia, and started scrubbing toilets. The design was never the problem at Midtown, Kessler said quietly. I know. Maya's voice was steady. But 3 men still died in a building with my name on the plans. Knowing it wasn't my fault didn't make it way less. She signed off on the revised foundation drawings that evening. Ashford offered her a consulting contract, a fee that had more zeros than her annual salary at the Days Inn, a relocation package. She declined everything. She drove back to Carthage in the white SUV, with the cardboard tube empty and her pencil case full, and Lena's notebook on the seat beside her, open to a drawing of a bridge that curved like a wave. 3 weeks later, the trailer park looked the same. Same gravel paths, same aluminum siding, same laundry lines strung between pine trees. Mrs. Okafor's wind chimes tinkling on the breeze, the marsh stretching flat and gold to the water. Maya and Lena sat on the cinder block step eating popsicles. The duffel bag was unpacked. The coffee can was back on top of the refrigerator, still holding $380, because Maya had refused every dollar Ashford offered. But things were different. The filing cabinet stood open in the bedroom closet. The drafting pencils sat on the kitchen table, next to Lena's notebook. Daniel's photograph was propped on the windowsill where the morning light hit it, beside the drawing of Lena's Disney castle. Maya hadn't moved to Atlanta. She hadn't rejoined a firm. She hadn't taken the interview requests or the 6-figure offers that arrived in the mailbox like letters from a life that wanted her back. Instead, she'd walked into the Carthage town office, found the building inspector, an overworked man named Harold who handled everything from permits to septic complaints, and told him she was available. No salary, no title, just an extra pair of eyes if they were needed. Harold had looked at her for a long moment. Then he handed her a hard hat and pointed to a stack of permit applications that had been sitting on his desk for 4 months. She'd been there every morning since. On this particular afternoon, Lena was reading on the step, the same notebook open, though she'd moved past bridges and into water treatment plants, asking questions about filtration systems that would have stumped a sophomore. Maya was sanding a piece of wood for a shelf she was building for the town office's file room, sawdust falling between her knees. A car appeared at the entrance of the trailer park. Not a Lincoln, not an SUV. A dusty blue station wagon with a cracked taillight. Victor Ashford stepped out. He wore no suit, no blazer, khakis, a polo shirt, boat shoes that looked like they'd never been on a boat. He carried a small bag. Not a briefcase, just a cloth bag from what looked like a bookstore. Maya set down the sandpaper. "Hey," Ashford said when he reached the step. "Hey." He looked around, the trailer, the marsh, the laundry line, the wind chimes, a far cry from the $400 million resort site. But he didn't look like he was visiting. He looked like he was arriving. "Ground broke last week," he said. "Micropiles are going in exactly where you spec them. Kessler says the foundation is the best he's seen on a coastal project." Kessler's being generous. Kessler is never generous. That's how I know he means it. Ashford reached into the cloth bag. "Also, my granddaughter is 9. She heard about Lena from me and insisted on this." He held out a package wrapped in brown paper. Lena took it and tore it open. Inside was a professional-grade architecture set, drafting compass, scale ruler, mechanical pencils, a pad of vellum, the kind of tools that cost more than Maya, made in a week. Lena's eyes went wide. "Mom, look!" She held up the compass, already opening it. "This is the real kind. This is what actual architects use." Maya looked at Ashford. He looked back. Neither of them smiled exactly, but something passed between them, a recognition, a settling, the way 2 people acknowledge they've walked through something heavy together and come out standing. "You want to sit down?" Maya asked. "Yeah, I'd like that." Ashford sat on the cinder block step beside her. Lena sprawled on the gravel between them, the architecture set spread out, already tracing curves on the vellum with the compass, tongue between her teeth. The late afternoon light stretched their shadows long across the lot. Somewhere in the marsh, a heron lifted off the water. A screen door clapped shut. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary place. After a while, Lena looked up. "Mom? Yeah? What's a micropile?" Maya leaned over and looked at her daughter. Then she pulled Lena onto her lap, picked up one of the new mechanical pencils, and drew a small diagram on the corner of the vellum. A thin column driven deep through unstable ground into solid rock below, holding up everything above it. "It's what keeps things standing," she said, "when the ground can't be trusted." Lena studied the drawing. Then she nodded, picked up the compass, and started designing something new. The trailer was still small. The marsh was still flat. The screen door still needed a new hinge by September, but something had changed. Not the place, not the circumstances, but the woman sitting on the step. She was no longer hiding. She was no longer running. She was just a mother, teaching her daughter how things stand up on a quiet afternoon in a town where nothing ever happened. Until it did. And sometimes, the biggest stories don't end with a helicopter or a contract or a motorcade pulling into the drive. They end with a woman sitting on a cinder block step, pencil in hand, finally at peace with what she knows and what she lost and who she still is. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever carried a weight you didn't earn or walked away from a part of yourself because the cost of staying felt too high, leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because every week on Victor's Stories, we bring you stories like this one. Stories about ordinary people carrying extraordinary things, about second chances, and about the moments that remind us that the strongest foundations aren't built from concrete. They're built from the decision to stop running and stand. I'll see you in the next one.